You ever found yourself in the middle of a game that you're trying to win? I mean, you really want to win, even though it's not a competitive thing per se. You don't like losing, right? Or most people don't like losing. Maybe there's a reason to lose for teaching a lesson, or maybe even learning a lesson, or maybe because the person you're playing against, like a grandchild or a nephew or a niece or a younger sibling, you're okay with letting them win because it boosts their confidence. But most of us, we don't like to lose. We really don't like to lose when we've played our best and it's some tiny little fractional rule that causes us to lose. Not because we did anything wrong, not because we didn't practice well enough, not because we didn't play hard enough, not because we didn't know what we were doing or have the talent or the skill, but because some little rule change beat us. I don't know anybody that likes to lose under those circumstances. But it happens to leaders every day. And that's what we're going to talk about on Leading Leaders. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders podcast. I had the chance over the holidays, the Thanksgiving holidays, to play a card game with my grandsons. It's one of their favorite things to do when we go to see them. And we've always played this little game called Uno. And I don't care how old you are, you probably remember Uno. It was around when I was a kid. But this generation has a new one called Uno, I think it's called Uno Flip. And in Uno Flip, there are some new cards that have some new features and some new rules. And everybody's always had the reverse card. And so you hold that reverse card so the person next to you gets the reverse, and then the next time around you can give them the draw 5 to make sure they don't go out, and so you kind of control the game that way. Well, Uno Flip makes it possible to flip your cards over, so now you have twice as many cards and twice as many options, and you can change colors to colors that nobody has, and you can do other weird things within the game, but there's still that one remaining rule that if you get down to one card and you don't yell Uno, you have to draw more cards. Well, understanding the rules of the game means that when you spot somebody, you can either call them out on that and wait until they flip that card and say, I'm out, and go, nope, you didn't call Uno. Or you can just let it go and see what happens and see how it plays out. Well, I have a grandson who's very particularly emotional when he doesn't win the game. And he also likes to gloat when he does win or when he throws that draw 5 card on you. And he did, and then he got spiteful. And so knowing that I held the Uno flip card to turn things around, just as he thought he was going to go out and cause him to draw more cards, meant that when he got to the end, he was ready to go out, but he played the wrong color. And when he played the wrong color, I didn't call him on it. And then he got to Uno, and if he'd realized he played the wrong color, he would have already been out. See, it's those understandings of the rules. And you might think about it as a leadership principle to say, well, why would you cheat a kid? I didn't cheat a kid. What I'm helping him to learn is that you got to play by the rules that are in front of you. Now, we don't often like that to be true because, like I said, there are many instances where we have played our heart out. We have done the homework. We've gone to the gym. We've hit the field. We've run in the dark. We've done everything necessary to be the best of the best at this game. We want to win. We pour everything we've got into it. Maybe it's an election cycle. Maybe it's getting that job or that promotion. We've done everything we can to win the bid. So our proposal is on the top of the stack. Everything we can. And then one little rule change or one little use of the rules by the would-be opponent or enemy, and suddenly we lose. Not because we did anything wrong, not because we did anything bad, not even because they're better than us for the job, for the task, for the competition, but because they know the rules in a way that we don't know the rules. See, there's a challenge in leadership today that says, I'm just going to keep doing me. I'll do me, you do you. And that challenge presents us with the reality that in the background, people are changing the rules. What you didn't know you were doing wrong, you're doing wrong. Oh, it wasn't wrong 5 minutes ago, but now it is. And now it can cost you. It can cost you legally. There are people losing their jobs over rules that didn't exist when they were hired. True story. There are people who are I was just listening to a senator in Australia who apparently he asked the wrong set of questions because while flying from what would be the Washington, D.C. of Australia back to his home state, so assume you're a senator and you live in Tennessee and you work in D.C., while flying back from the capital to his home state, he was arrested at the airport. He was tested 3 times to see if he was positive for COVID. 3 times their test came back and said no. And yet they still put him on house arrest for quarantine for health reasons. Well, he's been there for several weeks now, and he's 3 miles from his own home, but he can't go home. And he's not supposed to be having a whole lot of communication outside of there, but they still give him access to social media. So what rule did he violate? Well, he's not positive and he's not sick, but apparently the rule he violated was speaking against the health agency. But who knew that was a rule? Who knew that you couldn't speak out what you know about research, about the things that you found? You can't just ask the questions. See, when I say that leaders find themselves in a place where the rules are changing, because the rules are changing to make sure that certain people win. I had a client recently reach out to me and say, can you help me with these communication principles? And I said, communication is what I do. What is the challenge that you're facing? And they said, well, I've been working in the field with a small group of people for the last 10 years or so, and I'm ready to move back into the corporate office. I started off in the corporate office in HQ, and when they put me in the field, I had some great success with it, but I'm getting a little older, and I'd rather be in an office environment than out in the field all the time. I said, okay, well, what's the challenge with communication? The client said, the challenge that I have is they don't speak the same lingo they did when I left. There are words that you can't say now and words that you can say, and that's a real challenge. And I said, well, yeah, that's absolutely true. You've got political correctness at a different level now than we had even 3 years ago or 5 years ago. There are things that I remember hearing bosses say the whole time I was growing up in corporate America. I worked in a Fortune 50 company almost 10 years. And in that environment, there were things that you would hear people say and others would gasp. I can't believe you just said that out loud. And many of those things today, they would just haul you out the door and with your pink slip and all your possessions in a box. It would be an immediate termination. But then there are also those things that you've heard for years and years and years, and if you say them now, could lead to huge fines and penalties and possibly even the loss of your job, or all of the above. So how do you play as a leader when the rules are constantly changing? Well, as a leader, that's one of your responsibilities, believe it or not, is to know that the rules are changing and to know how the rules are changing. But let me go one step further than that, because I also believe as a leader, it is part of your responsibility to be in the involvement of making the rules. If you're sitting idly by on the sidelines and waiting to see what happens to you and the people around you, to you and the people that you care about, to you and the people that you lead, then the odds are you're not really leading in the capacity that you should be or could be. If the rules around you are changing and you're not aware of it, that's a bad thing. But if the rules around you are changing and you're not influencing them, that's a horrible thing. In my opinion, that's an abdication of your responsibility. You've got to be engaged as a leader. You've got to know what rules have been proposed to be changed. You've got to know who's proposing those changes, and not just what is the surface of the rule that's being changed, but what's the meaning behind it? What's the long game? Because trust me, nobody reverses the cards just because they have only one card to reverse it with. Oh no, they've got a strategy in hand. They're about to throw a 5-card draw at somebody else, or that is their manipulation of the game as a whole. The same thing's happening from local jurisdictions like your local police department, your school boards. Maybe you haven't seen it. There have been school boards who have changed the rules for parents who live in the district and pay school taxes and their kids attend the schools, that if you want to speak at a school board meeting, before you can speak, you have to give your full name and home address. Hang on. don't we have a Fourth Amendment for that we have a right to privacy in our persons, that nobody can ask for our papers? That's part of what our Constitution is written on. Our Bill of Rights, the Fourth Amendment, specifically protects us against revealing those things. I plead the Fifth Amendment, gives us the right not to self-incriminate. But if we feel like there's any danger to our family because of the things that we have to say, we shouldn't have to out ourselves. In fact, 18 months ago, there was a process for that. It was called doxing, and it was a felony to reveal somebody else's home address in a way that might make them unsafe because of their political views. Now, all of a sudden, the school board has made it a requirement. If you want to speak your opinion, you have to first dox yourself. You've got to be willing to say, here I am, here's where I live, this is where my children sleep. Before I can share my opinion, I have to completely become vulnerable to the school board and anybody listening, whether it's media or other people who would stand up for the things that I'm speaking against. That, my friends, is a rule change that somebody in leadership should have stepped into. We've seen other bad plans along rule change lines in the school districts as well. We've seen boards of education who are approving books that most of the parents in the district wouldn't approve of. In fact, there was one particular case where the school board had approved a book, had been on the shelf in the public school library for months before it was found. And when it was found, a parent took it to a mayor, and the mayor, who was also an attorney, took it to a judge and said, Judge, if I were to take this book out in the public and expose children to this book, what would you say? And said you'd be arrested for indecent exposure and felony peddling of pornography. And so the mayor took the book back to the school board and said, look, you're peddling pornography in a degree that would be considered a crime. So either you resign or I'm going to slap you all with charges. Okay, sometimes you've got to play by the rules that are presented to you, and sometimes you simply got to change the rules. Now, this is not a podcast specifically about school boards, but that is one minor application that we see right now in today's world where the rules are being changed and most of the people being impacted by those rules have had no say in it. It's happening in the halls of Congress. It's happening in our health industry. It's happening in pharmaceuticals. It's happening with various mandates. But rules are being changed to benefit one side versus the other, to benefit one political view, to benefit one organization. Now just ask yourself how much money has been made on a vaccine that has not proven to be effective. How much money has been made by the government because they hold half the contract? The evidence is out there. How much money has been made in the climate agreements? How much money has been made in the nuclear shutdowns or the transfer of weapons from one nation to another? When leaders are not aware of the rules that apply to them, they're in trouble. And it's a bad thing for a leader to not be aware of those rules. It's a worse thing for a leader who is not willing to engage to affect those rules and help make sure that the rules that are made remain fair. I don't care where you lead, if it's in your home, if it's in a large organization, if it's in politics, if it's in your local community. If the rules are changing, make sure that you've taken the steps to have your voice heard in those rule changes. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.